Hello and welcome to another Clare video special. Today we're reflecting on Clare's exit from the Munster Senior Hurling Championship in rather controversial circumstances, and to dissect the game and the incidents themselves we're joined by Fergal Hegarty, a two-time All-Ireland winner, and Eoin Brennan, known to many as the man with the pen and paper on the sideline, the highways and byways of County Clare. So gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, buddy.
And
thanks, buddy.
I suppose there's only one place we can begin. The main talking point from LIT Gaelic grounds yesterday is Clare's Munster Championship ended, and all focus really being on James Owens, the man in the middle. Owen, you were close enough to the incident, or closer to most. Was it a penalty? Was it the right call? Was it the wrong call?
Well, I wasn't close enough to roar at him anyway, or shout in his ear, or give him a word of advice. But yeah, look, it was fairly along that eye line, all right. Yeah, look, it was bizarre. You know, it was bizarre. I mean, you were sitting just right beside me, and I actually thought that he'd given Eoin McCarthy a red card. It didn't even cross my mind that it actually would be given for the cynical foul on a goal scoring chance, because it was just it was outrageous, really. And the more you think about it, and when you actually look back in it afterwards, you see that even Jake Morris didn't even argue for it. He put the ball down as if to say, and he ran away back to his position as if to say, I've won a 20-meter free, we've got the score. No one actually argued for it. It was actually hard to see why he would have given it. You know, often referees get swayed by, you know, maybe the crowd, number one, but definitely players saying, you know, that should have been a penalty, But there wasn't even that. I mean, the amount of shock that you could see from Eoin McCarthy, number one, from any of the players. He didn't really even consult the linesmen, umpires. You know, it's a huge decision that hinged a Munster Championship game that was very, very tight. It's hard to know. It's hard to know his reasoning. I'd love to be inside his head to work out what was his reasoning for it, because it didn't make any sense in the context of the game.
And Fergal, you know, the replay, it's been shown dozens and dozens of times since. It doesn't make it any. It doesn't add any bit more clarity to the actual call that was made by looking back at it.
No, it was probably as bizarre as the under-21 final in 2008, I think, but against the same opposition in Páraic, when the 65 was given for Tip to win the game. It was along those lines how bizarre it was. I think, you know, definitely you couldn't make an argument that there was the goal scoring opportunities, plenty of defenders back, and even if there wasn't, you know, in the photo shot, he had a lot of work to do to make up whatever it was, 30-40 yards. Defenders would have got back. He was coming in along the end line. The goalie would have had a great chance. You know, there's so many mitigating circumstances. You know, it just didn't add up. And I think he panicked. But I think the rule is a crazy rule anyway. I think the rule was ridiculous bringing it in, because it's leaving it up to the interpretation of a referee. Big call. Like, you nearly need to have the TMO if you're going to have that rule. I think it's a bizarre rule, and it was brought in. You know, a lot of people shouting and roaring the last couple of years, predominantly football people, who wanted to bring this rule into hurling. And if you look at the history of the last 5 years, a lot of football is a great game, don't get me wrong, but it's a different game to hurling. No more than hurling is a different game to football. So you need a different set of rules. And you football people, I don't know whether it's the green-eyed monster or what, hurling was at an all-time high, and they're shouting, looking for rules to be brought into hurling when there was no need. And it came to pass then on yesterday that you had a decision made that was a crazy decision. But I think the rules should be thrown out. There's no need. There's nothing wrong with hurling. And I'm not looking back to the last 20 years nostalgically saying it isn't the game it was. I'm looking back to 3, 4, 5 years ago. The game was in the best order in the history of the game, and they decided to tinker with it. Even the annoying thing of introducing a yellow ball, what was the need for that? It's constantly people trying to make name for themselves, and, you know, on social media, etc. And I think we need to leave hurling alone and concentrate on the game that it is. It's a great game. There's no need to make these silly rules. And I think, unfortunately, Clare came out the wrong side of it yesterday.
And Fergal, just on that, one of the main issues, I guess, with the rule is interpretation. It's such a wide concept. There's no definition for interpretation in a rule book. So one referee's interpretation is different to another's, which can add to the frustration.
Absolutely. And you could make an argument, Waterford could make an argument last Sunday, the previous Sunday, that wasn't a penalty either. And definitely the Limerick game on Saturday night, I couldn't see how that Cork got a penalty. There was plenty of defenders back in front of the man that was running through with the ball. So there's 4 or 5 boxes need to be ticked if you're going to give a penalty. And certainly yesterday there was none of those boxes ticked, and there wasn't even on Saturday night. Not all the boxes were ticked. So I think the GA need to sit down and look at it. I think a lot of tactics have come from football, even the tackling. You know, I watched the Wexford game on Saturday night, and the amount of guys coming in with 2 hands, using the hand with the hurley and the spare hand, and it's like football tackling, and they're ripping the ball from people. And referees during the league pulled for all those, but they can't pull for all those because it'll ruin the game. But the problem is, and I go back again to the same point, football coaches came into hurling and they've introduced these negative tactics, and even the 15 men behind the ball, and that it's a pity because there was nothing wrong with hurling. And you look at Kinnerk and all these football coaches, and they have the game is going down the wrong road, and I don't know how it can be stopped now. It's a juggernaut, it's a runaway train. But certainly the game isn't as good as it was even going back 2, 3, 4 years ago. You go back to 2013 when Clare won the All-Ireland, 2 fantastic games. Look forward to when Galway won the All-Ireland there in 2017, I think was, played really good hurling. That seems to have, now yesterday was a very good game and Saturday night's was a very good game, but there's a lot of negative tactics that unfortunately have come into the game and brought in from rugby coaches, football coaches, and I just worry for the game going forward.
And Eoin, just there was obviously another controversial enough call that maybe wasn't made down the other end of the pitch in terms of the altercation between Aaron Shanner and Barry Heffernan. It was a bit further away from the two of us than the Aidan McCarthy, Jake Morris incident. But maybe looking back on it, do you think Clare were deprived a penalty they should have got?
I think you could definitely argue that it should have been a penalty, but at the same time, my initial instinct was that they were both at it. It looked to me from a long way out that Shanner had a hold of him, but as the ball came in, definitely Barry Heffernan just rugby tackled him to the ground. So depending on where the referee saw it, and maybe he saw both sides of it, he just said 2 wrongs don't make a right for either side. I'm not sure, but look, you could definitely argue for a penalty. I definitely saw a Clare defender having a full-scale swipe at a Tipperary forward when he had the ball in his hand, albeit that he was facing away from the goal. But that could have been called. There was a lot of instances like that, and definitely, Clare can feel aggrieved they didn't get a goal. Probably should have had a couple of chances as well. But Eibhear Quilligan had to make a couple of great saves. You could argue too. But going back to the penalty, that was the game changer, because I think Clare were so shell-shocked after it. And I get the 2-4 to 2 points, and we should have saved the third goal. That's fine, but Clare were so shell-shocked. We never recovered from that. And in fact, if you look at it, I know we got the last 5 points of the game, and maybe Tipperary did look a bit leggy, although they probably got a bit more from the bench in terms of scores than we did. And we finished quite strongly, but it seemed like the game was over at that stage. They were 9 clear, and it was kind of one of those things where they came back. So I definitely think that incident changed the whole complexion of the game, simply because Clare were so shell-shocked. They never recovered from it, really. And if you look at the stats behind it, only 1 Clare forward scored from play in the entire second half. I mean, that isn't good enough in any respect, but the fact that we were minus a forward for those 10 minutes was a significant factor.
Yeah. And we just have joining us here now, Ger Hoey, former county referee, club referee, is going to join in with us here.
His timing is impeccable.
Timing is very good. But just as Ger is connecting Fergal to his audio there, for just to put one point you, Fergal, if a decision goes against a team like that, what can a management do to make sure the heads don't drop, or, like as Eoin says, Clare ultimately didn't recover from that? I think
it's very difficult, and I think particularly as Eoin said, because the injustice of it added to the kind of frustration. If it was a justified black card or sin bin, then it made it more difficult. The fact that there were players were frustrated, you could see management were frustrated, and quite rightly. But I guess Tony Kelly, for me, I think the experiment worked to great effect against Waterford. I was surprised they went with it again yesterday, particularly when Cathal Barrett is a well-known, teak tough cornerback, probably the best in the business. And it really didn't upset Tipperary to the same degree as it upset Waterford. And I think we left him in there far too long. And even against Waterford, I felt we left him in there far too long. For me, Tony Kelly has to be, around the middle of the field, where he's most influential. And particularly when we were down to 14 men, I think he should have been given that role, and he would have helped out the defence. He's a good man to go back into defence and get mop up ball and join the attack lane. So for me, I think that was something possibly that should have been looked at even prior to the game. But certainly as the game unfolded, I felt that we needed Tony further out the field.
And Ger Hoey joins us now, active club referee, former inter-county referee, and has recently taken up a presenting gig with Scarf Bay Radio. So, Ger, just to go through the big talking point from Sunday's game, that decision by James Owens to award the penalty into sin bin Eoin McCarthy, as the only referee on the call, was it the right decision?
Páraic, can you hear me?
Nearly loud and clear.
Great, okay. Yeah, personally speaking, no, it was not the right decision, Páraic. It was really stretching to the ultimate limit, the length to which you can actually give a penalty in that situation. So no, I didn't agree with it, don't agree with it. I think James overstepped the mark in his application of the rule. And I don't know was it some kind of a brainstorm he got, but it was really, really stretched. Because if we look at it in any logical way, and Fergal Hegarty and yourself and myself, we would all be kind of putting our hands on our hips wondering how he came to that decision. Reading the rule book, you could say inside the 20-metre line is fair game for calling the penalty. But in that situation, with the Clare defenders able to crowd him out, there wasn't a goal-scoring opportunity on. So, no, don't agree.
And Ger, one of the points made by Fergal would be, it's fair to say he'd be fairly against the rule being in place. The issue of interpretation and a referee's interpretation, how can you apply that to a rule? Because, your interpretation might be different to another referee's interpretation.
Yeah, that's the problem we have in the GA, Páraic, that it is left open to interpretation. But like as I said, James's interpretation was very, very much wide of what we would consider a goal-scoring opportunity, and you would be more or less having to be within sight of the post, really, or nearer the action, really, because that's the problem. But the way the rule is structured, it does leave that room for vagueness there. And people will talk about a common sense application, but sometimes the common sense application and the GA rules don't really marry at all, and you kind of go strictly by the rule. But it was really taken, James's interpretation of the rule was really taken at a far greater, I'd say, than people would have suspected. Now, I do know that our countyman Anthony Daly in his podcast had Fergal Hegarty on earlier in the year talking about the rule, and I think it was highlighted in that podcast that it could happen that way, and I think yesterday really proved it did happen. But But I just go back, Páraic. My own sense, and a lot of people disagree with the rule. My own sense is that the rule is there for a good reason. Because there was a bit of cynical play coming into a fella bearing down on goal, and he'd been dragged down, and the most a fella could get before this was a yellow card and probably the penalty. But the sanction of the sin bin has its own merits, and I would agree with that. But actually, it does leave a lot to be desired as regards the latitude as to which the rule can be applied. I think that's the difficulty for us.
And Ger, do you think that cynicism was more prevalent at county level than club? We know the cornerbacks in Clare seem to be fairly seen at club level.
Yeah, I think there's creeping in everywhere. I mean, if you look at it, I could spend the next 3 days talking to you about the rules and the tackle in hurling at the moment, lads, and bore you to death. But basically, the coaching of defenders is to not to let the man in, and to pull down and take a hit for the team is really truly there. So yeah, I think it was brought in to address now the situation. But I also have another issue, and I don't know what the lads think, but I think why they didn't actually give the referees in hurling the ability to use the black card as a signal to the player and the team and the spectators that he was sent off mystifies me. The argument that they didn't want to bring in football into hurling doesn't wash. If it's a sin bin and a black card, it's a black card. I mean, you're telling a fella it's a second yellow, or it's a yellow and a sin bin, and you're pointing to the stand. But I think it makes a joke of the whole thing, anyway. But that's a personal opinion.
Ger, was one of the points we put to Eoin was on the other incident between Barry Heffernan and Aaron Shanahan. From your view of that, do you think Clare had a right to be angry that they didn't get a penalty at the other end?
Yeah, I thought definitely that Barry did foul Aaron in that game. In that Barry Heffernan had no clue where the ball was. He wasn't looking at any ball. All he was doing was wrestling with Shan. And I mean, Shanahan, in fairness to him, is a big man and he knows how to play the game as well. But I definitely thought that on the merits of risk and the merits of assessment of the situation, I thought it did warrant a penalty because there was a pull down and the defender was not going for the ball. He was playing the man, and I mean, you're supposed to tackle the ball. So yeah, definitely a penalty there for in my view.
And Fergal, just to move to maybe a bit more tactical or to look at the game itself, you spoke on Tony Kelly, maybe would have brought him out earlier in the game or have been aware to the Cathal Barrett threat. But do you think Clare should have maybe changes quicker, especially when Eoin McMahon came off and we knew we were maybe going to be a bit more fatigued given that we were down an extra man for 10 minutes?
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to that, you know, we were shell-shocked, but I think, yeah, Paddy Maher was left free at that point, as far as I could see, and he mopped up a lot of ball. He was under a lot of pressure earlier on. Maybe some fresh legs at that stage as well could have been thought. But you know, some of our lads had ran themselves into the ground. Ryan Taylor, I thought, was outstanding in the first half. He was everywhere in the amount of scores he was involved. It was phenomenal. You know, Cathal Malone had a huge second half as well. The two Galvins that ran themselves into the ground. So I suppose it's easy talk when momentum switches against you, and then you have the kind of injustice of it. It's very hard to kind of wrestle that back. And I think, as Eoin said, the game went out of sight very quickly. The goal was, you know, of a very soft variety, and Eber won't be, you know, too happy when he looks back on that. And that was a killer blow, particularly after the penalty, to give away such a soft score. And you know, we were fortunate enough in the end that we were able to kind of bring it back, because I thought Tip missed a lot of scores when they were on top, and they missed a couple of great goal scoring opportunities which Waterford didn't create. I think John Conlon wasn't allowed to dictate as much. No, he played well, but he wasn't allowed the freedom of the back line which he was allowed against Waterford, and that had a big bearing on the game. Even if you look back at the first goal, you know, when Breen got through, if that was the previous Sunday, Conlon would have been there in front of him. But so Conlon had to mark his own man, and that certainly had a big bearing on it as well.
And Eoin, do you think, you know, a lot of Clare's lesser lights, I suppose, are unsung heroes, like Rory Hayes, Ryan Taylor, as Fergal mentioned, Ian Galvin played very well. What more could have been done, do you think, for Clare, or was it ultimately the shell-shocked nature is what decided the outcome?
Yeah, I think it was so close. I think Clare had done so well. You know, a team like Tipperary, and it ultimately did happen with the sin bin. You know, it's the double whammy of it, really. The penalty was bad enough to recover from, but it's the sin bin afterwards as well. It's nearly, we've gone from having no punishment and no deterrent for a defender to having maybe too much punishment. But anyway, that's besides the point. But Clare just seemed to be getting on top, and the screws started to be turned a small bit. Kelly had won a free just after half time, and Cathal Barrett got a yellow card because of it. And I think on that, then there's a borderline. If you're a man marker, as a cornerback, definitely, and you're on the best player in the park, you're automatically, you know, the decision is, do you switch off him or not? So Clare had seemed to got the upper hand. They seemed to have the conditions at the back. So it was a huge decision. And I think Clare's game plan up to that had been not to let Tipperary get that far ahead. They had their periods of dominance, but they never got more than 2 points clear of Clare at that stage. But once they did, there's no better forward line to kind of hammer the point home than Tipperary. You know, they had that kind of swagger involvement, and the more space they got, the more Clare were desperately defending. Now, some of the defending back there was kamikaze at times, but we got away with it. And in fairness to Lohan, every championship game that we've seen, he's got the maximum out of his players in terms of performance. You can argue about switches and maybe making them a little bit earlier, but they were pretty much the same time as the Waterford last time out. David McInerney coming on, nearly the same format of subs as well. Mark Rodgers definitely added something to it. I thought he was a little bit more unselfish. I thought if he'd been more selfish, he tried to pass off 2 to Tony Kelly. We saw the shot he had himself. I thought if he'd had 1 or 2 shots, he's got a great knack for goals. Not since Conor McGrath probably have we seen a goal scorer like it. So I think he maybe should have taken 1 or 2 of those on, and who knows. But I think the game was, 9 points is a huge amount to try and make up in the last 10 minutes.
Páraic, I thought just on Owen's point there, Cathal Barrett was on the yellow. I thought he was very unlucky to get a yellow because I didn't think he was persistent, Tony, unless the referee was told at half time that he was doing something off the ball. I thought it was a very unfair yellow card, but once he gave him the yellow card, there was a clear second yellow card offence, which was, very obvious. Tony was out in front of Tony, and then he kind of let Tony off, fouled him, and a dangerous swipe across him. And I thought the referee bottled that one. That should have been a second yellow, albeit the first yellow was very unlucky. He should have been gone at that stage. So I think that was a huge call in the game at that point as well, which I think the referee got. Maybe it's missed in all of the controversy over the penalty, but I thought that was a very straightforward decision. It had to be yellow card, and he should have been off.
And Owen, obviously you were there in the Gaelic grounds as well. You heard the emotion of Brian Lohan and how frustrated he was. Do you think he'll be able to use that to rally Clare now in the qualifiers? Because understandably the players are obviously gutted as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously been involved in his own grievances as a player in that kind of situation as well in Championship. But definitely, yeah. But I mean, it's no consolation. I mean, for Clare, it would have been massive for Clare to get to a Munster final. It isn't so big for Tip, albeit that they have a kind of an older average age, let's say. So it might suit him not to be playing every week. I mean, if Clare get drawn out next Monday in the first game back in the qualifiers, they've got to play every week for 4 weeks to make an All-Ireland final. So that's once a week now. Championship at that level, it eventually caught up with them last year. So the qualifiers, I think it would have meant a lot for Clare to get through to a Munster final. So, number one, that is the biggest grievance, that they didn't go through the front door, because it would have made a huge difference for Clare. It definitely can be a rallying thing. It has kind of got that siege mentality that Loughlin used to bring in terms of getting the county together. Everyone is behind this in terms of decision, and you could probably say the whole country feels it's a wrong decision. But at the same time, as Lohan said in his interviews yesterday, what can we do about it now? There's no appeal or anything you can do about it. You just got to take it on the chin and try and move on. And it can be a rallying call for Clare, most definitely. And I think a couple of guys coming back in from injury as well, if they could get them fit, Clare would be a strong possibility depending on the draw in the back door as well. So yeah, all is not lost, but and they can definitely use it as a motivational tool. And
Ger, obviously it is the qualifiers there. Would you be confident that Clare can bounce back and put together, as Owen says, it's a hectic schedule, but that they can, make the knockout stages of the All-Ireland series?
Yeah, I'm very impressed with Clare this year, Páraic, in that way they galvanised together, as the lad said, the way Brian has got them playing as a team, that we have the class player in Tony Kelly, but we also have Cathal Malone, we also have Shanahan, we also have the lads playing well around him, and they're playing together as a team, which is great. Two Galvins, I thought, were very good yesterday, but I think we'll give it a good rattle, and I think that maybe barring injuries, that a good run of every week games might actually help that team immensely, and with a decent run they might go a long way.
And Fergal, just to turn to yourself as well, do you think there's anything that needs to be done? As Owen says, I think he's right, and even Ger Loughlin writing in the Star is kind of hammering home that siege mentality. But what do Clare need to do now to actually bounce back and put together a decent All-Ireland campaign?
Yeah, I think I don't think they need to get too caught up. I think, that if you learn from mistakes of the past, I think if we go back to 1998, it's a long time. It's the last time Clare won a Munster Championship, actually. That year, too much sideshows, and, this needs to be put to bed now, apart. Can't change it, as Brian Lohan said, move on. I think we need to make, a couple of slight changes on our personnel. I think David McInerney brought a big improvement when he came in there yesterday. For the life of me, I can't see how Jack Brown isn't featuring in that back line. I think he was nearly an All-Star nominee a couple of years ago. It seems to have, maybe it's gone back to his UL days or something, but the management don't seem to have faith in him. And I think he's a big player who would have a big part to play if they give him, put him in there. I think up front, we just need to be a bit sharper in front of the goals. Shanahan's a great man to win possession, but again, yesterday, shoot, let him down. A couple of very handy chances. One off his left, one off his right. Now the one off his right actually turned into Tony Kelly's goal. But I think that I think Tony Kelly needs to play further out the field. I think when you're going up against these defences that have specialised cornerbacks, unlike Waterford, where they had to change their team around, it's easier mark Tony in around there. I think if he's midfield, he can float in, and he had a fantastic year last year as a midfielder. And I think by his own standards yesterday, he was quiet and ended up getting a bit frustrated, had a few crazy shots from the sideline, etc. So I think we need to look at that as well. But we're in good shape. If you look at Saturday evening, I think we're well able for the likes of Kilkenny, Wexford. I think Limerick are coming back slightly to the pack as well. So a lot to be hopeful. Stay injury-free and just get a little bit more clinical in front of goals and a bigger spread of scorers. I think we need it. We can't rely on Tony Kelly to be putting up these huge scores. We need Eoin McCarthy and these guys to step up a little bit more. And our work rate is fantastic, and that's not in question. But just need to be a little bit more clinical in front of the post.
Okay, so we could talk. I think we could talk hurling all day and rule changes and controversy and whatnot. But one would have a feeling that we are probably going to get Wexford in the qualifiers, but sure we'll wait and see. So many thanks to Eoin Brennan, to Ger Hoey and to Fergal Hegarty for their insight and analysis. And we'll be back looking ahead to the qualifier whenever it is, against whoever it is in the Clare Echo on Thursday, with more insight and analysis. So thanks very much to the lads, and thanks for watching.